From the Columbia University Language Resource Center, this is Said and Done, the podcast about languages and the people who speak them. This is Said and Done. I'm Chris Kaiser, and joining me is Professor Anggi Suharja, who teaches Indonesian at Columbia University. In this interview, Anggi discusses growing up speaking Indonesian as a native language, as well as speaking two other local languages. We'll talk about how local languages serve as a resource for constructing neologisms in Indonesian. We'll also discuss her identity as a member of the Sundanese ethnic group, which is primarily located in West Java. Here's my interview with Anggi Suharja. Professor Anggi Suharja, thank you so much for being here at Said and Done. We're really happy to speak with you today about Indonesia, Indonesian language, and your experience growing up speaking Indonesian and some other languages in Indonesia. So can you talk a little bit about where you grew up and the environment and the languages that you spoke when you were growing up as well?
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. It's very nice to be here today. I'm from Indonesia, and I was born and raised in this city, Indramayu, which is located in the northern part of West Java. So when someone asks me where I am from or like what language I speak, it reminds me of this meme where they have like a lot of buttons and then you don't know which buttons to push.
Right. Yeah, sure.
That's me. So I was born and raised in the city Indramayu, but my parents are from other city, which is Majalengka. It is also located in West Java. And my parents, both of them are Sundanese, one of the ethnic groups in Indonesia. So that also makes me a Sundanese. And saying that, I speak Indonesian as my native language, but growing up, I also speak Sundanese, the language of Sundanese people. So my parents speak that in our house. But since we migrated to Indramayu, like a different city, there people speak another local language.
Okay, and what language is that?
Yeah, so this language is called Cirebon, Bahasa Cirebon or Cirebonese. So I also speak Cirebonese language with Indramayu dialect.
Okay, so you speak three languages of Indonesia, is that right?
Yes, exactly. So two local languages,
right.
Sundanese and also Cirebonese with Indramayu dialect, and also Indonesian as my native language, because that's what my parents use since I was born, because we migrate to like other city.
Right. So of those three languages, you would say that Indonesian or Bahasa Indonesia is the one that you feel strongest with or the most comfortable with.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And sort of when you're thinking or when you're dreaming, what is the language that's going through your mind as in those circumstances?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. So far, as far as I remember my dream, all of them are in Indonesian.
Okay.
But I think it's also interesting because I think there's this one time when I think in English as
well.
But rarely in my local languages.
Right.
Yeah.
When you dreamt in English, was it when you were in Indonesia or when you were here in the United States?
It happened recently here.
Okay. And we should say that you are here at Columbia doing a Fulbright year.
Yes.
So this year you are at Columbia through the Fulbright exchange program, and you're teaching Indonesian here at Columbia for 1 year. And then you're also taking some classes at Columbia as well.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
And now you've been here for 7 months or so.
Yes, exactly. This is my first time to the US, and this is my first time to New York, my first 7 months.
Okay. And that's around the time when you start to dream in the language that of the area in which you're living.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that you were from Java,
yes.
Which is an island in sort of the south central part of Indonesia. Is that right? Yeah. Now, I am really not that familiar with Indonesia and the geography of Indonesia, and I think a lot of people might know generally about Indonesia, but they don't quite grasp some of the ways in which that country is configured. So could you talk a little bit about how Indonesia is set up or how it exists geographically? And the reason I ask is because I want this to be the first episode of a series of episodes that we're going to do on this podcast about Indonesia, because I've noticed that so often we have Indonesians here at the Columbia LRC or just in New York generally, and I want to learn about all these different parts of the country, but I want you to kind of give us an introduction to a certain extent to this country and to this culture. So could you talk a little bit about the geography of Indonesia?
Sure, I'm more than happy. So yeah, a lot of people know Bali, but what sometimes they don't know that Bali is only like one island out of 17,000 islands in Indonesia.
Whoa, 17,000 islands. Okay.
17,000 islands. So that's the first thing about Indonesia. It's an archipelago. So we have a lot of islands, a lot of water, a lot of beach as well. We have a tropical climate, and also it's very humid. When you step out of your plane, and then when you are in Indonesia, sometimes you realize how hard it is to breathe.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's so humid, and there's a lot of earthquakes as well. Because we are surrounded by volcanoes under the sea.
So it's a seismically active area.
Exactly. So sometimes you feel like, is this earthquake or like it's my low blood pressure? Because it happens a lot. And then Indonesia has 5 big islands. Out of those 17,000 islands, we have 5 big islands. There are Sumatra, Kalimantan or Borneo, Sulawesi, also there's Papua, and Java. And Java is where I come from, and it's the most populated island in Indonesia.
And Java is where the capital is. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where Jakarta is located. And then Indonesia has a lot of people in it. Like we have 270 million people, which makes us one of the most populated country in the world. I think it's the 4th most populated country in the world. And the half of the population is in Java.
Wow. Okay. So you have, I actually happen to have a map of Indonesia here, and I see Java is a long, flat island, but I see that the rest of Indonesia is quite large, and Java is just one piece of that. So you have half of the people living in this one particular part.
Yes, exactly. Although it's one of the biggest islands in Indonesia, it is not the biggest among the other 4. Borneo is the biggest one. Yeah, so it's very interesting. And then, because we have a lot of volcanoes as well, there were some volcanic eruptions. But the ashes is actually one of the factors that make the soil becomes very fertile. There's this famous songs in Indonesia, and then it says, orang bilang tanah kita tanah surga, tongkat kayu dan batu jadi tanaman. And this lyric means that our land is like a heaven, because even a stick and also a stone, it can become a plant.
Oh, wow.
So we have like a lot of plantations, like palm, rice especially, sugar. So a lot of plantation for the industry.
When I think of Indonesia, I think of a very green place. Lots of forests, lots of tropical plants.
Yeah, it is. It is very green.
I wanted to ask about the population of Indonesia. You said it's the 4th most populated country in the world. Is the population distribution, is it older population, a younger population? Do you happen to know that?
The recent data shows that Indonesia's young people population is starting to grow bigger. In 2030, it is expected that Indonesia will have their demographic bonus, because people in the productive age is way higher than those older people.
So it's a country that's going to grow in population and not diminish.
Yes.
It seems to me like Indonesia is a country that is going to be increasingly important in the world in the coming decades.
Yeah. Yes, that's right, Chris. This is also like one of the things that not a lot of people know about Indonesia, that it holds a very big economy potential. The economy is really growing.
When you came to the United States, people say that in the US, it's a kind of consumer economy, a consumer mentality. Did you find that it was strange the way that people live or people behave in the United States, or is it something that you did not find that strange?
I think in terms of that consumerity, I don't find it quite strange. It's pretty common in Indonesia. Even for me, I think as Indonesian, when I was in Indonesia, it's so easy to buy stuff in marketplace because everyone can sell everything and easily. But here, I think that how I buy stuff is not as easy as it was in Indonesia. Yeah, so
Oh, that's fascinating.
yeah. And maybe also because I lived in Java, so I can just like get out of my house, and then I walked around 10 meters, and then there's this food stall, or like there's this mini market. So it's very easy to find stuff to sell everything.
Right.
And people like also like to buy everything as well.
So when you walk outside your apartment, what do you see? What is the scene? Can you kind of paint the scene?
Okay, so usually when I walk out of my apartment, there will be a lot of Gojek drivers.
What's that?
So Gojek is like Uber in Indonesia. It's huge. It's Indonesian owned. And then not only cars, they also have motorcycles. So there will be like a lot of them, and it's everywhere. There will be a street food seller, and there will be like small stall or a convenience store, and then there will be like people. There's a lot of people, more motorcycles, definitely, and even like people sell fuel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In a container, or in what? How is it delivered?
In a container, so like just on the street, like they have like a small stall, and then they have the fuel in the container, and then so when we don't find any fuel station, we can just stop there, and then they will fill it for us.
Okay. And is that for just motorcycles or for cars as well?
Normally it can be both, but normally people who go there are like the motorcycle ones.
Okay, gotcha.
Usually cars go there for emergency.
Oh, right. So if you're really in trouble, you can take your car there. Okay. You mentioned that you grew up speaking Indonesian, and is it normal to call it Indonesian or Bahasa Indonesia? What does Bahasa Indonesia mean?
So Bahasa Indonesia itself means Indonesian, as in like the language, because Bahasa means language. So Bahasa Indonesia is Indonesian language. Or so you can do both, either Indonesian or Bahasa Indonesia.
Your experience of growing up with really a first language, Indonesian, and then knowledge of two local languages, is that a common experience for somebody your age, or is it uncommon? How much do people speak Indonesian? How much do they speak their local language? Can you sort of talk a bit about the relationship between these languages?
Oh yeah, I find this very interesting because living in Indonesia, for me, it's also about being a multilingual. Because Indonesia itself, with more than 300 ethnic groups, we have 718 local language throughout the nation, throughout the archipelago. And 400 of the languages are in Papua. So these languages are the local languages. Sometimes it derived from Austronesian language family, and then sometimes it is also because they have like more contact with other language, then it creates another local language. So sometimes it is related to your ethnic group or your where you are or what ethnic group live there. So we have 718 local languages, which normally is the Indonesian native language. Yeah, so normally Indonesian have local language as their native language, and then they acquire Indonesian after that, like consecutively.
And is that the case for somebody who's a 5-year-old today? Is it likely that they're speaking the local language and then acquiring Indonesian?
That depends on like where they live,
Okay,
and their family backgrounds, because as much as I want to say, like, this is what is common, now we have like, mixed marriage, like cross-culture marriage. And then people migrate, just like my family. So that's why, like, instead of having Sundanese as my native language, I have Indonesian as my native language, which doesn't really happen a lot. So for me, it's a special case. So I speak Indonesian as my native language because my family migrated to other city. I think my parents don't want me to feel, to be confused.
Right.
Yeah, when I go to school. So instead of teaching me either Sundanese or Cirebonese, they use Indonesian first. And then after that, I pick up Sundanese. And then Cirebonese from my friends, and then from my family, like from my grandma, from my relatives. But yeah, normally Indonesian have their local language as their native, and then they acquire Indonesian because Indonesian is the national language and also the language of the country, which means it is used as the instructional language in terms of education, our laws, any official events in Indonesia.
So actually, I had a question about Indonesian then. You have this sprawling archipelago with so many islands and so many different languages, 400 of which, 400 some are in Papua, which is the island in the eastern part of Indonesia. But Bahasa Indonesia, Indonesian language is, as you said, the language that is the national language. But what is the origin of that language? Is it from a specific area and that was chosen as the language for the whole country? Or is it some kind of amalgam of different languages? I'm not really sure. Can you talk about that language?
Yeah, sure. So Indonesian is originated from Malay language. And going back, like historically, Malay language was used widely in Indonesia and also in Malaysia. Especially, we also we're very close to Malaysia as well. Back then, Malay was spoken like very widely.
As a kind of lingua franca.
Yes.
Okay.
So like people speak Malay, they say as a market language because they use it when they go to the market and they do the transaction. And it's also used because they say it's easy. In 1928, all young people from all around Indonesia gathered in Jakarta and they officially recognized Indonesian as the national language. And that's when Indonesian was officially recognized as our national language. Now, the position of Malay language, if we are talking about like Indonesia, in Indonesia, Malay language is still spoken, but it is categorized into a local language because it is spoken in Sumatra, in a part of Sumatra, which is very close to Malay, close to the Malacca Strait.
And that's in the far west part of Indonesia, right?
That is the far west of Indonesia.
Yeah.
Yes, in Sumatra Island. So yeah, that's how it started.
So I still don't quite understand. Is there a difference between Malay and Indonesian? So Malay is sort of the originating language of Indonesian. But it's also now it's different, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how different is it?
When we talk to people who speak Malay, we can understand each other. But when we speak to each other, I would use Indonesian and my friends from Malaysia will still use Malay because we have different choice of words. Some words mean differently. So I also have like some relatives in Malaysians and we mostly like speak in English instead to avoid misunderstanding.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
And how is their English?
I think like English is more widely spoken in Malaysia because I think English in Malaysia is a second language, when in Indonesia, English is a foreign language.
Right.
So our access to English and learning English is not as good as it is in Malaysia. So yeah, it's how different it is. But sometimes we most of the times we still can understand each other. But sometimes to avoid misunderstanding, we use English instead.
Well, it seems to me that if you have two languages that are very close, but there are some lexical items, some words that have different meanings, then there's perhaps an even greater opportunity for misunderstanding because you think that somebody means one thing, but actually they mean something totally different.
Exactly. But I think a lot of Indonesians and also Malaysians are aware of this. So like when we talk to each other, we were like thinking, oh, maybe that's what they mean, or maybe that's what this means.
Okay, so you have an awareness of this
Yes.
potential pitfall,
Yes.
and maybe you know that this word in Indonesian is actually meaning something else in Malay, so you can
Yeah.
anticipate a point of confusion. Is that
Yeah.
the case?
Yes, exactly. And then I also think that today Indonesian has Indonesian has been exposed to a lot of other languages as well. So we have a lot of new words, like we pick up new words, and then we also have some borrowed words, and then so it is still developed. Like it keeps developing. Yeah.
Well, Sundanese, this language that you know growing up, is that language also continuing to evolve, continuing to add new words, or not?
The dynamic of local language is not as intense as Indonesian. However, being a multilingual, we mix our local language and also Indonesian. But instead of developing the local language, we enrich Indonesian with the words from local language.
Yeah, why don't we talk about that for a little bit, actually? It's one thing that I was really curious about. I guess one type of question that I have for you is, so in the realm of technology, there are new technological words that are always coming about for new devices that are invented. So how does a technological word like the word for iPad, for example, or a tablet, how does that come into your everyday linguistic use?
Yes. So initially, we use the English terms for that. We use laptop, for example. But these days, as we are trying to enrich Indonesian vocabulary, the special team in our government that is in charge with the Indonesian dictionary created this new word that is the equivalent of laptop in Indonesian.
And what word is that?
This word is kojing or komputer jinjing.
Okay.
So komputer means computer,
Yeah.
and then jinjing is like carried on.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
word for a laptop computer is komputer jinjing.
Exactly.
Okay, and that means computer carry.
Yes, carried computer.
What are some other words that have come about in this way?
Yeah. This is also interesting because not only like they create this term from Indonesian itself, we also find new words adapted from our local language. For example, the download and upload. Like Indonesian doesn't have any terms for those.
Right.
But in Javanese, which is actually the biggest ethnic groups in Indonesia and also the most spoken language, local language in Indonesia, they have this concept of taking something from above and also putting something
Back up somewhere?
back up. Yes. And Indonesian try to pick up that concept to translate to translate download and upload. Yeah, so the word from Javanese to take something down is unduh.
Undu?
Yeah, it's usually used when we want to like pick our mangoes like from the tree.
Right.
Or like fruits. They're usually for fruits. So now Indonesian word for download is unduh.
Wow.
Because it has the same concept. Yes, and they also like have these requirements to officially put a word in our dictionary. It has to be unique. Indonesian doesn't have this concept, but Javanese has this concept. So we can have this word from Javanese to Indonesians because it is unique. Indonesian doesn't have this concept.
Right, yeah.
And then second, it has to be in line with the rule as well. Like how if we put inflections, it has to be in line with Indonesian rule, and that it needs to have like a good connotation. And it also have to be euphonic.
Right, it has to sound nice.
So nice. And also it has to be widely used in terms of the frequency and also the range. As in like unduh. Although it is a local language, but in terms of the frequency, unduh is often used in the corpus.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of range, unduh is also used in like different part of Indonesia as well, although they are not Javanese. So it means that, oh, this word can be adapted to our Indonesian dictionary. And not only Javanese, we also have words from other local languages, including Sundanese as well.
Let's stay for a minute on undu, because I have a couple of questions about it.
Yes.
Just so I understand, this is a word that, so you needed a word for to download
Yes.
and also to upload.
Yeah.
And there was not a good candidate Indonesian word. But undu was a word in Javanese. Now, my question is, were people starting to use this word throughout all of Indonesia to describe upload and download? Or so was it a kind of top-down thing, or was it a bottom-up thing? Did it come from the usage of people in Indonesia, or did it come from a decision from the Indonesian dictionary to use this word? What was the origin of this neologism?
Yes. It is a top-down approach, so it's being campaigned. So not all Indonesians now do this, but maybe in the long term, in the long run, I believe these words like unduh and unggah will be more widely used. They are widely used right now, but it took like few years
So
after the first appearance of the download and upload
Right.
terms.
So when a new word like this comes along, how do people find out about it? How do you know that this is the word to describe this specific thing?
Oh, they have different reactions. For me, most people that I know, they would feel proud and like, oh wow, like these words, they're amazing. I don't know that Indonesian have these kind of words. Then I want to try to use it. And also like the media right now, they're also trying to use it as well, because it is also mandated in our law, in our rules, that in official events, we have to use standardized Indonesian. And that means if we have the Indonesian terms, we have to use the Indonesian terms rather than the foreign terms. But there are also like some people who are more pessimistic, or like they feel like there's no need in preserving our local language, or there's no need in using Indonesian terms if we can use the English terms and people still understand it. Yeah. So.
How do you feel about that? If there's a word, will you use an English term, or will you use the new Indonesian term? Which is where do you fall on this?
I would say I will be proud to use the Indonesian term for that. And also it depends on where I am talking to, who I am talking to. If it is in a formal setting, I would want to use standardized Indonesian as much as possible. Then I would try to avoid the English terms if we have the Indonesian terms. And I love to introduce that to like my friends, and then also to my students as well. But if I'm talking with my friends, usually I think it's still okay to mix code. So
Right.
like, yeah, it depends, because it's a natural phenomena to mix code. But I would love myself to be disciplined.
Okay.
So I'll try to stick with one language.
Do Indonesians use a lot of social media or that kind of thing?
Oh yes, big time.
Okay. And how does the Indonesian language change when it's used in that context? Or how is it used in that context?
Yes. So interestingly, with social media, it really exposed us, especially young people, because young people are the ones who use the social media the most, that it introduces a lot of English terms, a lot of foreign terms. So like it's actually like one of the way of how Indonesian itself as a language can be challenged.
I was going to ask, because it seems to me like on the one hand, you Anggi wish to use the Indonesian terms for new concepts in Indonesian. On the other, I know that you are a social media expert and you use social media. Do you see this as a field of tension or as a contradiction, and how do you resolve that contradiction?
Yes, I see this actually like social media can be a way for us to even campaign more about language and to campaign more about Indonesian. And this is also what I do with my organization back then in Indonesia. As a language ambassador, we gathered 15,000 followers. for our social media account, and with that account we campaign on like Indonesian language and also local language, but as well as the importance of mastering the foreign language.
Can you talk a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually, initially this was a competition conducted by the Ministry of Education and Culture of Indonesia. In every province in Indonesia, they have like this language agency that is in charge of language preservation. And these agencies in every province, they conducted this competition for young people, 18 years old until 25 years old, who wants to be a language ambassador. So
and what does that mean to be a language ambassador?
Oh yeah, so to be a language ambassador, it means we carry the responsibility to preserve local language, to maintain Indonesian as our national language, and also to campaign on the importance of the foreign language. Because with that multilingual, background of Indonesia, these real language shouldn't be a threat to each other, but instead we can do all of these three together. It can, all of these three can go hand in hand. And our job as a language ambassador, after like we got selected from like a series of selection process, we are given our lifetime responsibility to campaign.
Okay, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems that you take this very seriously. Why is it important? It's kind of a unique thing to think that the government of Indonesia and the people of Indonesia value multilingualism. They value the coexistence of different languages in one space. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you think it's important?
Yeah, actually, Chris, like when I, growing up, I speak Indonesian as my native language. And then I rarely use Sundanese until I joined this competition. We were in quarantine, they gave us training, they gave us knowledge, and then that somehow like raised my awareness of how important it is to be a Sundanese, how important it is to be an Indonesian. And that's when I realized that, oh my God, I tell people that I'm Sundanese, but I rarely use that. I know how to speak it, I understand the language, but I rarely use that because I'm comfortable with my Indonesian. But I feel like ashamed of claiming that I'm Sundanese, but I don't really use that language. So I think that all of those realizations make me realize that all this time I don't see the importance of maintaining our identity as a Sundanese and also as an Indonesian. And I think it's important to have like a strong root of who you are.
You're talking about how you've somewhat recently really rediscovered your Sundanese identity.
Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit about what that entails, what it means to you to be Sundanese?
Being an Indonesian for me also means being a Sundanese. For me, being Indonesian is a part of my identity, and being Sundanese is a part of being Indonesian. Because Indonesia has these 300 ethnic groups, and I grow up being a Sundanese. My parents are Sundanese, and when I was a kid, we call our sisters, older sisters, with honorifics, and for Sundanese it is teteh. It is different in different local languages. Because we lived in a different city, we migrated, and then my friends don't do that. My friends don't call their older sister Tata, and I was questioning, like, Mom, why am I different?
Yeah.
Like, who am I? And then that's when I realized that, oh, I am a Sundanese. That's why this is the language that I use. Growing up, I also realized that my parents has been raising me in Sundanese values. Like Sundanese has this term, someah. So someah, it's a way of like how you talk, how you smile, how you are being polite. Because politeness is highly valued. Or when my mom, when she was about to go for a pilgrimage that lasts for 40 days, and before she went there, she knew that she will leave me when I was still in primary school, so like I was still a kid. And then I remember she told me that when I'm gone, when I'm not here, please remember to do silih asah, silih asih, and silih asuh. And those are a very important philosophical value in Sundanese. Silih asah is to sharpen, which means you have to keep giving knowledge to each other, sharpen each other's skills. And then silih asuh means to take care. So please silih asuh with your sisters, take care of each other. And then silih asih, which means to love each other. Love your sister, love each other. And now I realize that who I am right now, how I perceive things, how I talk, it's influenced a lot by all of these values.
Right.
Yeah, so it's very important for me. So when I meet like Indonesian, not only we are going to ask them, oh, you're Indonesian. Yes, I'm Indonesian. Not only that, we are also going to usually ask some follow-up questions like, whereabout in Indonesia you are from? And when I say, oh, I'm from Bandung, which is the capital city of West Java, and most likely they would be like, oh, so you are Sundanese. Yes, I am Sundanese. And we want to know that because when we know where they are from or when we know what language they speak growing up, can be like our common ground.
Right,
Like we
sure.
know how to address them, like, oh, what honorifics we can use to them. So when people know I'm Sundanese, they will refer me as Teteh. So a lot of my friends also call me Teh Anggi because when they are younger than me, they call me Teh Anggi. And I think like it's a part of me, like being a Teh Anggi is a part of me.
So if you were to travel to a part of Indonesia that was quite far away from Bandung or from from Java, like say you went to Kalimantan,
Yeah.
and you presented yourself as Indonesian and as Sundanese, how much would people really pick up on that? How much would it be meaningful to them? Or would they just see, oh, she's Indonesian or she's Sundanese? How strongly inflected is this regional identity?
Usually when it is still within Indonesia, people usually will know that you belong to one particular ethnic group by how you talk. For example, like some Sundanese are well known for being very quiet, very soft when they speak, or they also like bow a little bit, that kind of things. And then so a lot of people would recognize that, would identify me, for example, as oh yeah, are you from Sundanese? Are you perhaps Sundanese? You know, sometimes they would do that. But of course, it doesn't apply to a lot of cases as well because of how big the population of one particular ethnic group, that it is easy to identify. Yeah. And Sundanese is the second biggest after Javanese.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so usually I also have a little bit of Sundanese accent when I speak in Indonesian, and that's how like they will identify.
I understand. Yeah. I was really fascinated by what you said about how your identity as an Indonesian, it includes the Sundanese identity.
Yeah.
So in order to be Indonesian, you are also Sundanese. So I was wondering, is that always the case for people in Indonesia? So does each Indonesian person have a kind of more regional identity and then a national identity that exist in a kind of harmony with each other? Or are there people who don't really have a sense of regional identity and they only have a sense of national identity?
I would say like nowadays, not all people are like this.
Okay,
Like, yeah,
so you think that maybe this is more unique to you?
yes, but also it's still common.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I would say this because these days there have been a lot of migrations and a lot of cross-cultural marriage. So let's say when my dad is Javanese and my mom is Padangnese, for example. If my friends ask me, so like which ethnic groups you belong to, I will say I'm a mix. Yeah, so like, oh, my dad is Javanese, my mom is Padangnese. So usually like we would explain that. And then if we live in the bigger cities where sometimes local languages are not used anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned before as well, like, nowadays local languages are facing some threats with
Right.
a lot of language contact.
Yeah.
In this case, it would be hard for them or for other people to identify which ethnic groups they belong as, or like which regional identity that they has, So in that case, usually they will just stop until, oh yeah, I'm from Jakarta. I live in Jakarta.
Right.
I was born and raised in Jakarta.
As opposed to going into a lengthy explanation of my mother is Javanese and my father's Sundanese and I'm from this area, they just say, I'm from Jakarta.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And it's also like the same as like, when you ask me like where I'm from, it's all of these different buttons that we can push. Okay, so how do I reply? Do I reply where my mom is from, or where my dad is from, or where I live?
Right, yeah.
Like all of those.
Getting back to this meme idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Which of these? So you kind of adapt based on the circumstances.
Yes, exactly. But I would say, being Indonesian, we know that we are aware that we are consisted of different ethnic groups. So although it can be very complicated to identify who you are, because you have to trace back where your family are from, and even like for me, I have again to trace back. I need to trace back why I speak these two local languages. Although I'm Sundanese, like pure Sundanese biologically.
So I wanted to ask one final question, which is you're an Indonesian teacher here in the United States. Can you talk about what it's like, for example, an American learning Indonesian?
Okay, so I think like so far, with my experience teaching Indonesian for foreign speaker, Indonesian is easy to learn.
Okay.
Because
Why is that?
yeah, because we have no tenses. So I think like it's for me, if I'm not like an Indonesian native speaker and I'm not an English native speaker, I think it would be easier for me to learn Indonesian rather than English.
Okay.
And then there's no subject-verb agreement. Nouns are gender neutral, and then you just need to reduplicate words to make it plural. We have no special character. We have gender neutral pronouns. Also, it's phonetic.
Okay, so it's easy to read and pronounce.
Yes, yeah. So I think like it's easy to learn Indonesian, but we have a lot of honorifics, and these honorifics are derived from local languages. And since we know that there's like 700 local languages, that could be like 700 way of like how to address someone.
Right.
Not only like, to big sister or like big brother, or you can also need to differentiate how you address like your professor. My students call me ibu, which also means mom, or it can also means miss or ma'am. They can call me Ibu Anggi, but sometimes outside the class, my students who are no longer my students, they change into like calling me Teh Anggi, because it has a closer, proximity.
Right, there's not that formal quality to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so sometimes even more buttons right now to push. Which
right.
honorifics should I use? And we have a lot of affixes as well. So it is easy to learn, but it is hard to master. Partly also because the diglossia.
Diglossia?
Yeah, the diglossia. In Indonesia, we have like formal context, informal context. We would modify some words if we are in informal context. And we have a lot of slang. We like to have abbreviations.
Right.
Which is fun actually. But like to some learners, it can be very frustrating that, oh, I know Indonesian, I can learn Indonesian. But then when they have to like make like an article, for example.
Right.
Bu Anggi, why is this wrong? Why I cannot use this word? Oh yeah, that is because so like, all of this
So it seems like the grammar is relatively easy to learn, but
Yes.
the usage of the language or some of the things that you do in the language or the ways of addressing people in the language,
Yeah,
that can be a bit complicated.
exactly. That can be a little bit complicated. But yeah, if I were not Indonesian native speaker, I would love to learn Indonesian.
Well, Anggi Suharja, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks.
Terima kasih.